Here we go. Hi everyone, my name is Angela Refuerzo Larsson and I am the Vice Chair of the Swedish Organization Against Statelessness. And the Swedish Organization Against Statelessness, or SOAS for short, is an organization working to spread awareness on the issue of statelessness in Sweden. And in Sweden there are currently 30,000 people living that are stateless in Sweden. And right now we have a campaign with the aim to spread awareness about childhood statelessness and how it's even possible for a child to be stateless and how this affects children. And this is episode number 2 in this podcast, in which I invite experts on the matter to tell us more about childhood statelessness. And today I have with me Zahra and Vera. And I'm so happy that you guys are here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your insights about this matter. But first, I'm thinking that maybe you guys could introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. And maybe Vera, you could start.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Hi Angela, thank you for having me. My name is Vera Karanika and I'm the Education and Program Assistant at the Insitute on Statelessness and Inclusion, or ISI for short. ISI is the first and only human rights NGO working on statelessness at the global level, with the mission to promote inclusive societies by realizing and protecting the right to nationality.
Thank you. And Zahra, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me in this podcast. My name is Zahra. I'm 23 years old, and after my bachelor degree in public law in Sweden, I decided to study a Master's of Law in Human Rights Law in London, which is where I learned more about statelessness. And I chose to do my master's thesis about statelessness, and my study focused on childhood statelessness in Sweden. The study aimed to identify causes of childhood statelessness in Sweden and examine whether Sweden's recent incorporation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child will make any difference for stateless children in Sweden.
Thank you. So I have a bunch of questions to ask you guys, starting with if you, Vera, could tell us a little bit about what childhood statelessness is and how many children there are stateless in the world today.
Yeah, so statelessness is a term used to describe the lack of nationality. It is a global phenomenon affecting millions of people of all ages and across all regions of the world, including children. It is estimated that at least 15 million people around the world are stateless, while every year tens of thousands of children are born into statelessness. In fact, statelessness is spreading faster than it's being solved, as every 10 minutes another child is born stateless. So to deconstruct the issue a little bit, nationality is the legal bond between a person and a country. For modern bureaucracies, having a nationality is a precondition to enjoy other rights, and in our case, child rights. In that sense, nationality is an enabling right, as it allows children to go to school and learn new things, to get healthcare when they need it, to travel abroad, and to feel like they belong to the place where they live and that they know. Now, when a person has no nationality, they are unable to participate in life in the same way as others. So stateless children often have difficulty exercising their rights, struggle to feel like they belong, and grow up to be disenfranchised and excluded adults. So we see that enabling rights are important throughout life, but no period is actually more crucial than childhood, because these are the formative years when one's identity, personality, and life trajectory are set in motion, and the cost of being denied education and opportunity is acutely felt not only in the moment, but also for a lifetime after.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And if I were to ask you, Zahra, how is it possible for a child to be stateless or to be born stateless?
Mm-hmm. Children can be born stateless due to citizenship laws that do not allow children to acquire nationality at birth. And this can occur usually in cases of marriage between persons of different nationality or through immigration. And moreover, discrimination is one of the primary reasons for children to be stateless. For instance, discriminatory laws that deny mothers the right to pass their nationality to their children, which happens in about 26 countries. And this can be very problematic because in some cases, the father can be dead or the child can be actually a result of rape where the father is unknown, and what happens is that they risk to be stateless for their whole lives. Moreover, lack of birth registration is an important cause of childhood statelessness, and belonging to a minority or an ethnic group that is discriminated against in a country can also be a huge reason for childhood statelessness. For example, the Rohingya minority group, which has been discriminated against for years. If these people get children, their children cannot get citizenship in the countries where they live. So there are actually many reasons for children to be stateless, but the primary ones are discrimination in various forms.
Yeah, I just want to highlight the point you said about 26 countries in which that has discriminatory laws. That's a lot of countries, especially considering that there's under 200 countries in the world. I think it's 196. So this is a big issue. If we were to look at this issue globally, can you tell us a little bit more, Vera, about how this issue looks globally, but also how it differs between different countries?
Yeah, just to add on also Zahra's point on the root causes of statelessness, I think it's worth mentioning that one of the biggest reasons of statelessness is also the fact that it is passed from a parent to a child. So intergenerational statelessness is also a very acute problem. Other reasons also can be that the nationality can be lost. So that we have seen that happening with entire groups, and often minorities in their country are stripped of their nationality. Or this also has been observed when a country ceases to exist and a new successor state denies nationality to some citizens of the previous country. And in general, nationality can also be taken away from people who are deemed to have committed acts against their country's interests. And when this happens, actually, the children of such persons sometimes also have their nationality taken away, despite this being prohibited by international law. So now on the global picture, I think we can agree that childhood statelessness is a significant worldwide problem. The UN estimates that approximately 1/3 of all people affected by statelessness globally are children. It is a phenomenon found on every continent and in most countries. In the 20 countries with the largest existing stateless populations, an estimated 70,000 children are born stateless every year. And their situation is often overlooked, but it doesn't make their predicament any less real. In most of the countries with stateless population, discrimination, as Zahra mentioned, is the key factor as to why people are made stateless. In countries like the Dominican Republic and Myanmar, race and ethnic discrimination resulted in the statelessness of Dominicans of Haitian descent and the Rohingya respectively. There are also the Nubians in Kenya and the Bedouin in Kuwait. In Malaysia and Sri Lanka, British colonial powers moved Indian Tamil laborers to its country, and these communities have had long struggles to secure Malaysian and Sri Lankan citizenship after independence. In Sweden and Germany, statelessness is a consequence of the failure to protect and grant nationality to refugees, migrants, and their descendants born in the country. And in 25 countries, including Lebanon, Nepal, and Barbados, women cannot pass their nationality to their child on an equal basis as men, which can leave them also stateless. So we see that there are many reasons around the world where children are rendered stateless, but the end result is the same.
Yeah. There's a lot of information about how unjust that is. Statelessness as a concept is very unjust as a whole because you're stripped away of your human rights. But just children being stateless is something so much worse also because they can't influence their situation at all, because that's the thing about being a child. Thank you very much. So could you tell us a little bit about your essay, Zahra? Because that's super interesting, considering all of this.
Well, I thought about talking more about the causes of childhood statelessness in Sweden, as Vera already mentioned. So avoidance of statelessness is actually one of the basic principles in Swedish citizenship legislation. But still, there are a lot of stateless children in Sweden due to various reasons. And when the United Nations Refugee Agency did mappings of statelessness in Sweden, they estimated that there were a number of 30,000 people who were stateless in Sweden, which was not actually 100% correct. And they think there are more stateless in Sweden than 30,000. But however, 1/3 of these are estimated to be children. So immigration has been one of the main reasons for statelessness in general in Sweden. The majority of stateless people in Sweden have entered the country through asylum procedure. So when the so-called refugee crisis started due, for example, the Syrian civil war, Sweden took in more refugees per capita than any other country in Europe. And the United Nations Refugee Agency's mappings showed actually that the majority of people who were registered as stateless origins from Syria. The mappings also showed that there were a significant number of stateless children born in Sweden to foreign-born parents, which is why there is like a distinct link between migration and childhood statelessness in Sweden. Another and perhaps the most important cause of childhood statelessness in Sweden is gaps in national legislation. Children in Sweden can acquire citizenship at birth only if a parent of the child is a Swedish citizen, or if a deceased parent of the child was a Swedish citizen at the time of his or her death. So a child who is born to parents who are not Swedish citizens cannot acquire nationality at birth, which is a very huge issue for children in Sweden. There are actually 30 countries in the world who have birthright citizenship, but Sweden is unfortunately not one of these countries. So every child born in Sweden that does not have permanent residence permit cannot even apply to get a citizenship through the Swedish Migration Agency. So to sum up, I would say that immigration is one of the huge causes of childhood statelessness in Sweden, but the most problematic cause is gaps in national legislation.
Thank you. So that means that if 30,000 people, probably more, are stateless in Sweden, and 1/3 of them are children, because that's what you said, right? That means that there are approximately 10,000 Swedish or stateless children in Sweden. That's like a small city.
Exactly, and the problem is that they're not only just stateless and like living their life as normal, because as Vera mentioned, they cannot usually access all the rights that normal children can do. But the most actually, the most like saddening thing that can happen is actually that they can also be deported from Sweden if if they came through an asylum procedure. So a child can be born in Sweden, not having access to rights, but also risk being deported from the country which they were born in.
Yeah, that's awful. Do you know anything about like why the opinions from like lawmakers and Swedish lawmakers about this issue?
The problem is actually, I cannot say that I know why it is like it is, but one of the problems that have affected stateless people in Sweden in general is the temporary act that was actually introduced a few years ago, which was an act that actually restricted the possibility to get permanent residence permit in Sweden. And obviously, if adults get affected by these laws and the citizenship laws look like they do, children will be affected as well. So the Temporary Aliens Act is actually one of the laws that has been affecting the stateless population in Sweden. I found out recently that the act should be actually only up until 2019, but they extended the act up until the summer of 2021. And the new migration policies have actually proposed to do this act as a permanent one. And that would be a huge problem for the stateless population in Sweden.
Yeah. Thank you. Vera, could you tell us a little bit about ISI's approach to childhood statelessness?
Sure. So addressing childhood statelessness is one of the core thematic priorities of the Institute. Since the Insitute was established in 2014, we have engaged extensively on the issue. We have produced research, designed training. We advocated for the child's right to nationality through UN human rights mechanisms engagement. And we also developed some tools to raise awareness among civil society actors in the field. Now, the core of our approach to childhood statelessness is to hold states accountable for failing to ensure that every child enjoys a nationality. Over the next 3 years, we have built a strategy to create a bigger impact with 4 main goals. That is strengthening the statelessness literacy of child rights groups and facilitating knowledge sharing and collaboration between them and statelessness actors by using the tools and strategies that we have already developed over the past 6 years with ISI. The second focus is to directly engage with children, reaching as many classrooms and extracurricular avenues as possible to build up children's knowledge, skills, and values on the issue of statelessness and inspire them to take action as advocates for the rights of stateless children around the world. To do that, we utilize a series of educational materials that we have developed that include a children's book, The Girl Who Lost Her Country. It is a story about Neha, a former stateless girl that travels around the world and meets children that are stateless and tries to find out more about the situation and the issue. We also have an accompanying teaching guide with activities for educators, which is called Teaching About Statelessness with Neha, and the graphic novel called Shapeless Apes that talks about statelessness and aims at young adults. The third aspect of our focus is mainstreaming the child's right to nationality by raising its profile in the work of UN bodies. UN bodies are mechanisms that hold states accountable for the child rights records, and in this way, by strategically engaging with them, we aim to raise awareness and the visibility of the issue. And the fourth aspect of our work aims at identifying the sticky issues. That's how we call them. They are issues that are yet to be crystallized, such as intergenerational statelessness, as we talked about, and statelessness and unrecognized states, or statelessness as a punishment. These are all issues that are connected with deeper structural problems, and we aim to decode them and bring positive change in these cases as well. And we hope that with the help from our partners and by establishing new collaborations, we will be able not only to fulfill these goals, but also contribute in achieving change on the issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Vera, and thank you, Zahra, for telling me and all of us all of this very important knowledge about childhood statelessness. Before we end this session, do you guys want to add anything? Is there something you want to tell us about?
Maybe I think it would be interesting to highlight that the framework to address these kind of gaps in law and policy and practice that we discussed is sort of there. So we have the Convention on the Rights of the Child that guarantees the child's right to acquire nationality. And also to preserve the nationality. So I think that we do have a powerful framework to hold states accountable, and we need to utilize it as much as possible to address the issue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Zahra, do you want to add anything before we end?
Yes, I actually would like to thank you for this work, and actually for working in this organization. I think it's very important to spread awareness about this issue in Sweden, because I noticed that a lot of people in Sweden seem to actually mix with statelessness with having lack of ID documents in Sweden, which is why this issue is not quite known in Sweden. And I think if you guys and like other NGOs continue on spreading information about the issue of statelessness, more people will be aware about it, and hopefully we can make a change in national legislation in order for it to be actually in the same spirit of the Convention on the Rights of the Child.
Thank you. And that was my thought too when I was told about when our chair, Jenna, when she told me about starting this organization, because SOAS is a quite new organization. We were founded in February in 2020, so this year. And I remember her just telling me about statelessness as an issue, like a couple of, I think it's 2 years ago, and I was just shocked that this is an issue in Sweden. Like there's 30,000 people living in a country of 10 million inhabitants that are stripped away from their rights. And I was like, if I had known about this earlier, I would be a lot more engaged in the question. So that's kind of our aim, just raise awareness and spread awareness, because I truly believe that politicians in Sweden and lawmakers are, I don't think that they understand like the friction and the broadness of this issue and how it affects children, as we have talked about, and also just people in general, and how important it is, and also that it's there's a possibility for change, because other countries have they are just going a lot further in legislations and just changing and making this a better place for eradicating statelessness.
Exactly. So like spreading awareness through your organization is a very good start in Sweden. I was so happy when I found out that this organization exists, because I was actually Googling for such organizations in Sweden in the beginning of 2020. and I didn't found any organization. And then actually my supervisor on my thesis, Amal Dechikara, linked me up with Jenna, which is where I knew that this organization was newly started, and that made me really happy actually.
Thank you. And that's, it makes me happy too. And it makes me happy that you guys are working with this issue in different ways, like writing your master thesis and working with ISI. So thank you guys. You're doing such an important work for the world today, but also for generations to come. So thank you. And also thank you for joining this podcast and for taking time away from your life to tell us all about this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you. And with that said, our next episode on child statelessness and this podcast will also be uploaded to our website. And so I just want to thank you for listening, and thank you guys for joining me. Bye-bye.
Bye.